For decades, Diane Keaton has been Hollywood's charming enigma, the quirky, funny, fearless woman who wore men's suits, broke every rule, and still made the world fall in love with her. From her unforgettable role in Annie Hall to her poignant performances in Something's Gotta Give and The Godfather, Diane didn't just act. She redefined what it meant to be a woman in Hollywood. But behind that smile and signature turtleneck was a story far deeper than anyone knew. Fame, heartbreak, and the constant pressure to stay relevant in an industry obsessed with youth all shaped Diane into the woman she became. While the world saw her as confident and unstoppable, Diane often wrestled with loneliness, self-doubt, and a haunting fear of time slipping away. Now at 78, Diane Keaton is no longer afraid to speak her truth. In interviews, memoirs, and quiet reflections, she's finally revealing the struggles that shaped her, the loves she lost, the choices she made, and the peace she finally found. This is the story of a woman who defied Hollywood's expectations, walked her own path, and discovered that true beauty isn't about youth or perfection. It's about authenticity, courage, and the power to keep believing in love even when the world tells you not to. Before Diane Keaton became the symbol of effortless charm and eccentric elegance, she was just a girl from Los Angeles with a dream bigger than her fears. Born Diane Hall on January 5, 1946, she grew up in a modest home in Santa Ana, California. Her mother, Dorothy, was a homemaker who longed for the stage, but traded her own ambitions to raise her children. Her father, Jack, was a civil engineer, steady, practical, and quietly proud of his daughter's wild imagination. It was Dorothy who planted the seed of performance in young Diane's heart. She would put on shows in their living room, cheering as Diane acted out little skits and sang old show tunes. "My mother believed in make-believe," Diane once said. "She taught me that pretending could be a kind of truth." But while her mother encouraged her to dream, Diane often felt torn between admiration and guilt. Watching Dorothy sacrifice her creative spark for family left Diane with a lingering fear that love might always mean giving something up. That idea would follow her for decades. After high school, she attended the neighborhood playhouse in New York, studying under the legendary acting teacher Sanford Meisner. It was there, surrounded by ambitious young performers, that Diane dropped her family name, Hall, and took her mother's maiden name, Keaton. She said it was her way of keeping her mother close while creating her own identity. Her big break came when she was cast in the Broadway production of Hair in 1968. Ironically, she was one of the few cast members who refused to take her clothes off during the show's famous nude scene. That decision didn't make her popular with producers, but it defined her spirit. Diane wasn't interested in blending in. She was there to stand out, on her own terms. Soon after, fate intervened when a young filmmaker named Woody Allen noticed her unique energy during auditions for Play It Again, Sam. She wasn't the typical leading lady. She was awkward, spontaneous, and refreshingly real. Allen was captivated. Their collaboration, both personal and professional, would lead to one of the most iconic performances in film history, Annie Hall. When Annie Hall hit theaters in 1977, the world met Diane Keaton, or rather a version of her that mirrored her real self. The quirky hats, the oversized jackets, the nervous laughter, it was all her. Critics praised her for redefining the image of a Hollywood heroine. She didn't play a fantasy woman. She played someone authentic, relatable, imperfect, and utterly irresistible. But behind the applause, Diane's success came with quiet isolation. Fame had a way of magnifying her insecurities. In interviews, she often described herself as shy and deeply self-critical. "I never felt like I belonged anywhere," she once admitted. "Even when people said they loved me, I wasn't sure I believed them." That uncertainty bled into her personal life. She fell in love with brilliant, complicated men, Woody Allen, Warren Beatty, Al Pacino, each relationship intense, creative, and ultimately short-lived. For a woman the world saw as strong and independent, Diane carried a private ache, the desire for lasting connection, something real beyond the silver screen. Yet, despite heartbreak and doubt, she kept reinventing herself. Every film, Manhattan Reds, Baby Boom, The First Wives Club, revealed a different side of her. She wasn't afraid to age, to play flawed characters, to laugh at herself. That courage made her one of Hollywood's rarest treasures, a woman who refused to be defined by anyone else's expectations. By the end of the 1980s, Diane Keaton had become a cultural icon. But beneath the laughter and success, there was a quiet question forming in her heart, one that fame could never answer. What does it really mean to be happy when the applause fades? By the time the 1980s rolled around, Diane Keaton was a household name. She had done what few actresses ever could. She transcended the idea of a leading lady. She wasn't the flawless starlet Hollywood wanted. She was something far more interesting, real, vulnerable, unpredictable. But with fame came a cost, and Diane knew it better than anyone. Behind the charming interviews and effortless humor, she was quietly fighting her own battles. Diane had always been her own toughest critic. In her journals, she often wrote about feeling not enough, not glamorous enough, not brave enough, not lovable enough. Her relationships, though passionate, often ended with her retreating into solitude. "I was terrified of being abandoned," she once confessed. "So I made sure to leave before anyone could leave me." Her relationship with Al Pacino was perhaps the most defining and heartbreaking. The two met on the set of The Godfather in the early 1970s, and though sparks flew immediately, their romance was as complicated as it was deep. Al was mesmerizing, she recalled. He was everything I wasn't, serious, brooding, unreachable. And maybe that's why I loved him so much. For years, their love story played out quietly behind the cameras. But while Diane dreamed of marriage and family, Pacino remained distant, consumed by his work and fears of commitment. When their relationship finally ended, Diane was devastated. "I had to accept that love doesn't always look the way you want it to," she later said. "Sometimes it's not forever. Sometimes it's just a lesson." The heartbreak didn't stop her. If anything, it deepened her artistry. She poured her pain into her roles, giving her performances emotional depth that audiences could feel but couldn't quite explain. In films like Reds and Baby Boom, Diane brought to life women torn between independence and longing, women who wanted it all but were afraid of what having it all really meant. Still, success couldn't fill the quiet spaces in her life. As her peers married, divorced, and remarried, Diane remained single. Tabloids speculated endlessly about why. Some called her eccentric. Others pitied her solitude, but Diane brushed it off with humor. "I never got married," she once said, smiling. "Not because I didn't want to. I just never met the man who could handle all this." Yet there was truth behind her laughter. Deep down, Diane admitted she carried fears of intimacy and rejection that kept her from ever fully giving herself away. "I think I was afraid of the messiness of real life," she confessed. "Love demands so much honesty, and I wasn't ready for that kind of nakedness." By the late 1990s, as Hollywood's obsession with youth grew harsher, Diane faced another challenge: aging in an industry that worshipped eternal beauty. She refused to hide behind surgery or denial. Instead, she embraced her wrinkles, her silver hair, and her evolving self-image. "I earned this face," she told a reporter once. "Every line tells a story. Why would I erase that?" Her courage to age gracefully became her quiet rebellion, a statement against the very system that had once defined her. She became an advocate for authenticity, encouraging younger women to embrace imperfection. "You can't be fearless if you're trying to be flawless," she said. Still, her journey wasn't without loneliness. In interviews, she admitted to moments of doubt, wondering what her life might have been if she had chosen love over career, family over fame. But Diane's story wasn't about regret. It was about acceptance. "We all make choices," she reflected. "And if we can learn to live with them, even love them, then maybe that's what peace really looks like." As the years went on, Diane found that peace in unexpected places, through art, photography, and her greatest act of love yet to come. By the early 2000s, Diane Keaton had lived several lives in one. She was a film legend, an Academy Award winner, and one of the most respected women in Hollywood. But for Diane, fame was never the destination. It was merely a chapter. What she really wanted, in her late 50s, was to rediscover who she was, beyond the applause. And she did that by returning to something that had always grounded her: Art. Long before acting, Diane had been fascinated by photography and architecture. She began collecting vintage photographs, curating coffee table books, and even restoring old homes in Los Angeles. "Buildings have souls," she once said. "Saving them is like saving a piece of history." In many ways, restoring homes became a metaphor for her own journey, learning to rebuild, to mend what time had worn down. Her passion projects weren't about money or attention. They were about meaning. For years, Diane had chased perfection, in love, in work, in appearance. Now she was learning to find beauty in imperfection. "I used to think life was about becoming someone," she reflected. "Now I think it's about being someone, and just as you are." That wisdom showed up on screen too. In 2003, she starred in Something's Gotta Give alongside Jack Nicholson, a romantic comedy that became an unexpected phenomenon. The film portrayed two older adults navigating love, heartbreak, and second chances, a rarity in Hollywood at the time. Audiences adored it. Critics praised Diane for her honesty and warmth. There was one scene, the famous crying scene where Diane's character breaks down while writing on her laptop, that wasn't even scripted. Diane had drawn from real pain, real memories, and the result was breathtaking. "That wasn't acting," she later said. "That was me letting go." The movie reignited her career, but more importantly, it reminded the world, and herself, that love isn't limited by age. For the first time, Diane wasn't running from her vulnerabilities. She was embracing them. Off-screen, she began to explore another dream she'd kept quietly in her heart: motherhood. In her 50s, Diane made the courageous decision to adopt 2 children, a daughter, Dexter, and a son, Duke. "I realized I didn't need a husband to have a family," she explained. "I just needed love. Motherhood changed everything." Suddenly, the woman who had always been focused on her career found herself waking up early to pack lunches, attending school plays, and discovering the joy of small, ordinary moments. "They saved me," she admitted. "They gave me purpose beyond the mirror, beyond the spotlight." Still, balancing fame and family wasn't easy. Diane was fiercely protective of her children, choosing to keep them out of the Hollywood glare. She often joked that they were unimpressed by her movies, and she loved it that way. "They remind me that I'm just mom," she said with a grin. During this time, Diane also became more open about her lifelong struggles with self-image, eating disorders, and the fear of inadequacy that had haunted her youth. In her memoir, Then Again, she wrote candidly about her insecurities and her complicated relationship with beauty. "I spent years trying to be seen," she confessed. "But it took me decades to truly see myself." Those words resonated with millions. Fans who had adored her for her wit now admired her for her honesty. In a world obsessed with filters and perfection, Diane Keaton's authenticity became her greatest legacy. By her 70s, she had achieved what most stars never do: peace. She lived quietly, often walking her dogs, tending to her garden, or exploring Los Angeles' historic homes. When asked about romance, she smiled and said, "I'm married to my life." It's been a good match. Diane had finally found balance, a life filled with laughter, art, love, and meaning. But her greatest revelation was still to come, one that would redefine how she viewed success, aging, and the idea of home itself. By the time Diane Keaton reached her late 70s, something had shifted, not in her fame, not in her fortune, but in her heart. For the first time in her long and extraordinary life, she felt at peace with who she was. The rush to prove herself, the need to please, the fear of being forgotten, all of it had melted away. What remained was gratitude. She lived quietly in her rustic home in Los Angeles, surrounded by her art, her books, and the photographs she had collected over decades. The walls told her story better than any magazine or headline could. Pictures of her mother Dorothy, snapshots from film sets, hand-drawn sketches of houses she'd restored, and countless memories of her children. Each frame was a chapter in a life well lived. "I used to think I had to keep running," Diane reflected in a 2023 interview. "Now I just want to stand still and feel the sun on my face. That's enough." She had learned that the real magic of life wasn't in the spotlight, but in the quiet. the laughter of her children, the beauty of an old oak tree, the comfort of her own company. After years of chasing perfection, she had discovered that joy could exist in imperfection. "It took me 70 years, she laughed, "but I finally figured out who I am." Diane often spoke of her mother, Dorothy, in her later years. Losing her in 2008 had left a void that never truly healed. But it also gave Diane a new understanding of love and legacy. "My mother never became famous," she said softly, "but her spirit lives in everything I do. She taught me that being creative isn't about being seen. It's about seeing the world differently." In her final memoir, Diane wrote about time, how it slips through our fingers, how it teaches us to let go. "You spend your youth running towards something," she wrote. "Then one day you realize the beauty was in the journey, not the destination." Even now she remained playful and curious. She was active on social media, sharing photos of her eccentric outfits, her home projects, and her dogs. Fans adored her wit and her refusal to take life too seriously. When asked about aging, she replied, "Why would I want to be young again? I worked hard to become this version of me." But perhaps the most moving part of Diane's later life was her honesty about loneliness. She never tried to hide it or pretend that independence was always easy. "I get lonely sometimes," she admitted. "But that's okay. Loneliness is part of being human. It reminds me that I'm still here, still feeling, still alive." Those words struck a chord with millions. In a world that often tells women they fade with time, Diane stood as living proof that grace, humor, and authenticity only grow stronger with age. She didn't chase love anymore, but she still believed in it. "Love isn't always romance," she said. "Sometimes it's friendship, sometimes it's your kids, sometimes it's the life you build. Love changes, but it never disappears." When journalists asked how she wanted to be remembered, Diane smiled that familiar crooked smile, the one that made audiences fall in love with her decades ago. "I want to be remembered as someone who kept trying," she said. "Not perfect, not fearless, just someone who kept showing up." Today, Diane Keaton continues to inspire generations of women, not by pretending to have it all figured out, but by embracing the beautiful chaos of being human. Her life isn't a story of tragedy or perfection. It's a story of resilience, reinvention, and the courage to live unapologetically. As she once said, gazing out over her garden in the golden California light, "I've played so many characters in my life, but the best role I ever had was learning to be myself." And with that simple truth, Diane Keaton, the girl who once dreamed of the stage, the woman who redefined Hollywood, had found her peace. Not in fame, not in love, but in the quiet, enduring beauty of her own story.